We've got our panelists here. Just as Commissioner Hahn reminded us all yesterday, is the European Year of Youth. So it's very good that we have this panel of young professionals, very apt and appropriate, taking over the floor. And also because, as we mentioned yesterday, more than 40% of our audience, both in the room and watching online, are aged under 35. We're going to be hearing how the panel chose their career paths. And to chair the session, I'd like to welcome Lucia Doval, a freelance audiovisual and literary translator who did the translation of the Galician subtitles for The Lord of the Rings of Power. Quite something. I asked her if she liked it. She said, not before I started. She may talk us a bit more through that later. And I'm sure she won't mind me saying she's 26, so she falls into that, young professionals. I'm delighted to hand over to the next generation of translators. Lucia, the floor is yours.
Well, welcome to the Young Professionals Taking Over the Floor panel. Well, where we'll be reflecting on our professional paths, how our academic training prepared us for our careers, and where we think the industry is going in the next decade. First and foremost, let me introduce the speakers on this panel. I'm in very good company here. Adrian Probst is a Swiss native German translator currently living in Brussels. He's providing freelance language and consulting services from English and French into German. Additionally, he's a content creator and hosts the YouTube channel Freelanceverse, where he publishes videos about various topics surrounding freelancing, translation, and languages. Ekaterina Pliassova has a BA in Japanese and English, as well as an MA in East Asian Studies. She has been working as an audiovisual translator since 2012, with extensive experience in translating, subtitling, and quality control work for a large variety of broadcasting channels and streaming platforms. Ekaterina is currently also working as a Norwegian language manager in audiovisual translation, and she's a member of Navio and Sautel. Filipe Stankovic is CEO at Linguaemundi. He's a young and very motivated CEO who has been working as such for the last 3 years. He originally started by getting his hands dirty and being involved in every possible step imaginable of the company. Now he's a bit more focused on just management. He loves learning, and quoting his words, has been truly blessed by an opportunity, although sometimes burden, very few young people get, to be in charge and to be able of actually try the new ideas from all the books he reads. And Krisztina Lapu has studied German language and translation, international relations and translation technologies. Now she's working both as a freelance translator and as an employee at Mentis SA, a Belgian company offering artificial intelligence services. Combining her fields on education, she follows her passion for languages and technologies. So please give them a warm welcome. And without further delay, let's get to it. We'll start the discussion with some reflections on our beginnings, our studies, and our first steps in our careers. So I'd like to begin with a question for the audience. I'm kindly asking you to go to Slido. And the question is there anything you wish you were taught but was missing in your studies? So whenever you're ready, please start Slido poll. And you'll have plenty of time to think about it, because we're going to listen to the speakers now, and we'll discuss the results later on. So I'll give the floor to the panelists now. How have your studies prepared you? Do you think you acquired all the necessary skills, or maybe anything was missing? Adrian, would you like to start?
Hello. Thank you very much, Lucia, for the introduction, and thank you for the forum for inviting us. It's an honor to be sitting here alongside the young professional colleagues. It's also an honor to be still called young. That is quite unusual. You know, in life you get older, but yeah, it's nice to be on this panel among you guys. A bit about my academic career, if you can call it that. I did a bachelor in translation studies in Zurich, in Switzerland. After that, I did a master's in the Netherlands, in Tilburg. This was more in information science, communication and information science. It was basically the closest thing you could get to computer science without having a technical background, right? And the idea was to go into computational linguistics. I was interested in NLP. Freelance translation, what I do now, was not at all on the horizon for me, but yeah, in the end, it happened that way. I have also a business education before my university, and now this prepared me, this combination of university and apprenticeship helped me a lot to be well prepared for the industry, I feel like. One thing I always say that was missing in my studies was a focus on freelancing, on making it on your own, on starting a business, really practical things. It was not really taught to us in Switzerland. Maybe that's because it's quite tough to make a living in Switzerland when you're self-employed. Maybe there's not really the interest of people going into freelancing. But I was mostly introduced to that only later on. So if I had some tips to my former university, it would be more practical approaches to, you know, how do you start a business? How do you write invoices? What is VAT? What is income tax, etc.? All these things that we then have to learn on our own. And another thing would be networking. I mean, I went through a three-year program, and I literally never talked to any real-life translators outside of university, which is kind of insane. And I'm trying to now tell all the students, just go out there, talk to people, get involved in the community. These would be my points.
Nice, I can't agree more. So, Ekaterina, how about you? I think your case is a bit different, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little bit different because I didn't actually study translation. At the time of my studies, there were no translation studies in Oslo, where I was living at the time, or I am from Norway. And so in order to acquire any kind of skills as a translator, I had to take elective courses and do a lot of my own research. I was doing quite a lot of like translation for the Japanese studies, but not so much English, so I had to do it all by myself. And so yeah, that would have been really missing for me. And but the one thing I really do agree that we also didn't have any kind of networking training or any kind of practical skills training. But I think that what I learned a lot, especially during my MA, was self-sufficiency and scheduling and planning, and learning by myself to actually meet deadlines, because my work today is very lonely and very deadline focused, and I have to be very organized. So I think that prepared me for that.
Awesome. Krisztina, what can you tell us about your academic training?
Well, I had translation as a module during my bachelor's in German studies, consisting of several tools in translation between German and Hungarian. And these courses were supposed to prepare students for a master's in translation. But by the time I got there, I chose a master's in international relations over a master's in translation in order to have a specialization. By the time I finished, I still didn't feel prepared to start a career as a translator. So I ended up working for a huge multinational corporation, a very common path for young people in Hungary, by the way. But I don't say I regret it, because here I realized I still have a passion for languages, for drafting in a different... I was working in German and English, and loved helping others with drafting emails and translating. And I also realized that I have a passion for working with data, that I really liked working with data, but a lot of people find boring. And up until this point, I was, going where life takes me, taking on the opportunities that life brings, and didn't plan much ahead. So when I set a goal, I found this one-year postgraduate program here in Belgium that is intended to prepare students to be tech-savvy translators, software website localizers, project managers, and computational linguists. This was by far the most useful to start a career as a translator, but I must say most of the curricula should be included in a bachelor's or at latest master's program and not a postgraduate program. And as for technologies, it was a really good start, but it was not enough. I was able to get an internship as a computational linguist, but it was not enough, and this is why I started to work at a company as a project manager, where I have the chance to learn more about data science, machine learning, and get to the field.
Nice. Filipe, what's your background?
So my background is not in translations, it's in economics. So I sort of stumbled across this industry, I wouldn't say by accident, because my parents own a translation company. So that's not too much by accident. So what happened was I was living in the US at the time, thinking about a career maybe in some international institution, something like the World Bank or something like that. And my mom got really sick, so she needed some help. She was not at the time apt to run her business, so I decided to come in and help as much as I could with the company. I started by doing translation and review. Lower those costs with your free labor. That was basically how I helped at the beginning. Then I moved on to project management. I was possibly the worst project manager in this hemisphere. I apologize if you ever worked with me. It wasn't easy. Then I found out I was much better at managing people than I am at managing projects. So I moved to more of a production management sort of role. Did vendor management a little bit as well. And then ended up in a more administrative managerial position with being the vice to my mother, who was the CEO, and then now I'm the CEO. What I will say about my studies is that it did prepare me to sort of think like an economist, think in terms of incentives. I think economists and lawyers have very peculiar ways of thinking, and sometimes that can be annoying, sometimes that's really, really helpful in the way we contribute with a unique way of viewing the world. And the other thing that I think helped a lot, which is non-academic, I think the non-academic stuff for positions that aren't translator, like project manager, like production manager, schools tend not to cover those too much. I don't know if this is anybody else's experience, but universities tend to sell the translation course and tend to administer translation courses more as focusing on being a translator. And there's just so many more positions in the industry that need to be filled and need qualified professionals to fill them. And for those, unfortunately, there still isn't a lot of opportunities in the academic field. I'm sure that will be covered more extensively in the next talk. But what I did find was that it's a very, very friendly community and a very open community to teaching. So I would just go on LinkedIn, see interesting people talk about interesting stuff, whether you go to Slater or Nimdzi or any of these platforms that you can use to learn more and educate yourself. And I would just contact people and schedule half-an-hour calls with them, and they would be very friendly and take it and teach me, and I'd learn, I'd take notes, try to be a good student and apply those notes that I took. And so yeah, my advice would be if you feel like academically you haven't been too prepared for this industry, there's a lot of really interesting and really knowledgeable people out there that are very willing to share their knowledge. So join LinkedIn and get to networking.
Yeah, networking is definitely a game changer. I'll tell you a little bit about me as well. I have a BA in translation and interpreting and an MA in audiovisual translation. And I think both prepared me in terms of translation skills, but some of the things were missing. In my BA in translation and interpreting, I missed a stronger role of audiovisual translation. I had only one module on that topic, and it was definitely not enough. I think audiovisual translation is a huge field with a huge demand of professionals these days within the translation industry. So I think a BA in translation should prepare students in terms of audiovisual translation skills. And then in my MA in audiovisual translation, I missed some training on accessible filmmaking and creative media accessibility. In case this is the first time that you hear about these concepts, accessible filmmaking entails collaboration between filmmakers, translators, and media accessibility experts, and also the users when it's possible. And then creative media accessibility means using media accessibility as a creative contribution itself. So yeah, these concepts are quite new, but I see an increase in demand, especially from filmmakers and content creators. So yeah, that's what I missed. And my MA in audiovisual translation, I think it should have a place in it. Okay, so let's see the results of the poll now. The question was, is there anything you wish you had been taught but was missing? And I see CAT tools, definitely. Business skills, that's something that you have to learn the hard way. Yes, that was an accurate question. Is there anything? Yes. Practice marketing, okay, yeah. Social media presence, that's super useful. Negotiating, that's something you have to learn as well in the hard way. Audiovisual translation, as I said. Project manager, that's a huge thing as well in translation, and I think it should have a bigger role in BAs and MAs, yeah. Yeah, thank you. We can let's move on to the next question. I have another poll for the audience, and this is a multiple choice question. So the question is, how long did it take for you to work full-time in the translation industry? And the answers are 1 year or less, 2 to 3 years, more than 3 years, or I'm still working on it. Okay, I'll leave the poll there, and I'm addressing the panelists again now. How was your start into the profession? What helped, or who helped, and what mistakes did you make? Krisztina?
Okay, so my start into the profession was, first of all, very late to start with a mistake, and I see I'm quite the exception, because on the poll I see no, it got higher. I'm still working on it. Okay, so 7 years, that's crazy. And it was because I didn't feel prepared. And I just want to say to all of you who are in the same shoes, feeling you are not ready, you still have so much to learn, just start. Don't listen to this negative thought. So since I've been working a couple of years, several years before in a different field, starting as a translator felt like a career change for me. What helped were mostly online resources and courses, conferences like this. Also last year I attended this conference online, and I had also one-on-one on one meetings. So I would encourage everyone to use that possibility because it's great. Also the content of other translators, like videos, like Adrian will talk about that later, and podcasts that helped a lot, reaching out to other translators. Now, as for specializing into technologies, it still feels like a career change, and to be honest, it still is. I have so much more to learn. And yes, it's never too late to learn more, but it shouldn't be a reason not to start.
I agree. Filipe, what can you tell us about your beginnings?
So, I feel like I already preempted a little bit what I'm going to say now. Yeah, I think that what helped a lot was talking to people that know more than me, that have more experience than me. They say you're the average of the 6 people you deal with the most in your life. So that's who you surround yourself with. Be smart about that. What else? Mistakes I've made. I think that the biggest one was. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, when you think you know more than you actually do, because you know so little. So I think that was definitely an issue at the beginning for me. So I had read all these books. You know, well, it's in the book. I read it. I know how it works in practice. And it turns out that there's a lot to be learned on the field, and a lot of knowledge. Some people are just really good at condensing it. More than books, actually, even. So just surrounding yourself with the right professionals, with the right people around you. And particularly for me, so it didn't take very long to get started because I was plunged into the industry immediately. I joined my parents' company. I got the unique blessing, as you quoted me saying, of being able to experiment a little bit with every possible position in the company. So that was very enriching in that regard. And experiment. I understand not everybody can ask their parents to let them do every single possible job in their company. So the best alternative to that is very often we think, you know, we are passionate about languages. We join this industry thinking we're going to be translators, and it turns out maybe translation isn't for us, but that's no reason to give up. There's just so many more alternatives, so many more possibilities in terms of you can be a vendor manager, you can be a project manager, you can be a production manager, you can be a team lead, you can be human resources, you can be a data analyst, you can just do so many things that I wouldn't get discouraged for any young people in the audience if you don't think that translation isn't for you or it's not panning out to be the way you thought it would be.
Perfect. Adrian, would you like to go next?
So I got my first job in the language industry right after my bachelor's degree in 2014. I literally sent out one application to a translation agency in Zurich. I went there as a project manager. Had the interview, the CEO, she said, you might be overqualified. I said, I don't think so. So I gave it a try, and I did. And luckily I was better than Filipe as a project manager. I enjoyed it. It was a very good experience for now, I feel like, because I see the struggles that are on the other side sometimes, you know, when a PM is dealing with this crazy 24 language job Friday night and still needs to assign it, and maybe there is not time for pleasantries like, dear Adrian, thank you very much, right? There might more be like, SOS, please help me. And I understand that the other side, that helps a lot. I could say it was like a calculated move to take this job to get into the language industry, but it wasn't. I just did it. I thought, why not? It's a good start, and it was. The start into freelancing was then later on when I moved to the Netherlands for my master's. There I met a lot of people who did what I thought would be amazing to do, which is freelance translating. I got introduced to people, I introduced myself to people, and especially online on Facebook groups. There was there is still a Russian translator called Simon Akramayev, if I say that correctly, who helped me a lot, who was a big inspiration starting out. And now, 6 years later, I feel honored that I can be also kind of an inspiration and, person that young professionals can reach out to. I started the YouTube channel, as you mentioned, called Freelanceverse, where I give people advice. It's a space where translators can go and exchange experiences, look for help, don't be afraid to ask. Especially when I saw the word cloud before, and it says CAT tools is still the biggest thing that people don't learn at universities. That's crazy to me. So yes, that's what helped me.
Your content is definitely useful and interesting for many of us. I didn't know it, and it was like a recommended discovery. Yeah. Ekaterina, how did you become an audiovisual translator?
So I really love cinema and I really love linguistics, so it was really just a matter of time before I ended up there. It just was the perfect marriage between the two. And so I chased the job and tried and tried and tried. And I think one of the things that really helped me was my tenacity. I was just super stubborn and I just wanted the job, specifically this one. And in the end, somebody had mercy on me, and then the snowball just started rolling very quickly. And the other thing that really, really helped me a lot is joining my local association, NAVU, the Norwegian Association for Audiovisual Translators. There I received so much support, so much help, there's so much information, and like Filipe said, there's a lot of already experienced people there who know a lot about the industry. So you get like a treasure trove of information that you need to move on in the field. In terms of, and today, I always emphasize how important it is to join your local association whenever I speak to anybody about the job. And in terms of mistakes that I have made, I think two things stand out to me, and one of them is that in the beginning, I felt very vulnerable to criticism. So I felt discouraged, and it was difficult, and imposter syndrome and all of these things. So my advice would be that criticism is a good thing, and it shouldn't let you get discouraged from moving on, because actually you should listen to your so-called elders, because they know what they're talking about. And the other thing I think that I failed a lot on, and I've only recently discovered it, is the life and work balance. It's really, really hard as a freelancer, and you take on either too much job or not at all. It's just, that's the one thing I would prepare maybe the most for, is knowing how much to work and how much not to work. Yeah.
Yeah, the most experienced professionals are indeed our allies. So yeah, go to them. In my case, I became a freelance translator before finishing my MA and 2 years after finishing my BA. And between my BA and my MA, I spent a whole year making a lot of mistakes. I made a really poor CV and I didn't know how or where to send it. I sent some CVs asking for a job instead of offering my services to places that only worked with freelancers. I applied for job postings like dubbing head supervisor at Netflix, and I didn't lack of self-esteem, that was for sure, but that was a waste of time. But I also made some good decisions. I had some great reference at the beginning. Pablo Romero Fresco was my thesis supervisor, and he showed me an exciting perspective on audiovisual translation and media accessibility. Then I met as well Javier Pérez Alarcón, who is an experienced audiovisual translator who selflessly taught me a lot on how the industry actually worked. And after a conversation with him, I knew exactly what my next steps would be. I worked on my social media presence. I started sharing content and consuming translation content. I started making connections. I joined the Spanish and Galician Translators Associations, and I eventually stopped asking for a job and started offering my services as a freelancer. I tried to improve my strategy every time I approached a client instead of sending the same email over and over again. And I got an increasing number of answers as I did that. And then after I had my first clients, of course, there were some new things for me to learn, like how to negotiate rates, how to organize myself, how to track my productivity, how to mark some limits and take care of my mental health, and so on. I'm still learning, you know, we never stop learning, do we? So now let's see the results of the poll, please. The question was, how long did it take for you to work full-time in the translation industry? 38% are still working on it. Nice. Good luck and keep working. 1 year or less, that's also motivating 35% of people. 1 year or less, okay, 2 years, 40%, and more than 3 years, 30%. Okay, that's motivating, I think. So we've been reflecting on our past and what we've learned from it. Let's now talk about the present, and let's talk about what is happening right now. Filipe, as the CEO of a translation agency, what are, in your opinion, the most interesting developments currently happening in the industry?
So, on that topic, I could say a lot, but I'll try to keep it short and sweet. So the first thing that's pretty obvious that's been happening over the last few years is consolidation. So for those of you that aren't aware, you see a lot of the really big companies buying, in the translation industry, buying some of the mid-sized companies, particularly targeting the 3 to 10 million range size companies. Because what happens in the translation industry is that you have a lot of really, really tiny companies, very, very few mid-sized companies, and then even less, but proportionally actually probably more than the mid-sized companies, really, really large mid-sized companies. So what's happened is people will get the company up to a certain size where it's like optimal to sell, which is, I don't want to mess up the numbers, but I think it's between 3 and 15 million in revenue. And they sell it at that size, and the big boys buy them, and they sustain their growth through mergers and acquisitions. So the reason why I think that has happened is because traditionally the translation industry has been an industry of scope, not scale. So what that means is there's a lot more benefits to be really small than to be really big. Some industries just work that way, some work the opposite way, some like the bigger you are, the cheaper you can buy each individual unit of something, and therefore it's really beneficial, like electric companies. Electric companies would be an example of being big is really helpful, right? In the translation industry, that doesn't have to be the case necessarily. So for example, you can have like a really small office of 2-3 people, and they're invoicing, I don't know, 400,000 euros a year, and their profit margins are like 250,000 a year, and you're like, how on earth is this possible that you have such massive, percentage-wise, such massive profit margins, right? So being small has been really good traditionally in the industry. That's where you can make quite interesting money. Once you start growing, what happens is you start needing human resources, you start needing production manager, you start needing all sorts of overhead, right? All types of jobs to sustain the structure of the company. And customers don't seem to be too willing to pay for that overhead. So for the majority of customers, let's say if you're a small lawyer's office and you need one thing translated into, a document translated into 2 or 3 languages, you're good working with a small supplier. You don't need a giant supplier. But what has happened is there's a lot of really, really large regular companies, that have needed to expand abroad and that are growing, and they need to localize and translate their services. And if you're IKEA, for example, and you do 200-something languages, content coming out every day, all day, big chunks, small, really small chunks, one line worth of content to translate, that's where you really need the big guys, right? That's where you need the big companies, because they're the ones that have the infrastructure to do 200 languages all at once and coordinate the massive logistics behind that. Now, the theory now is that with data, with the data stuff that we're seeing, with the value of data to train machine translation engines, to discover customer patterns, to do all sorts of things, what we're seeing is that with all this data, maybe the tables have turned. Maybe now being big pays off more than being really small. And that's what a lot of companies are gambling on. They're gambling on, let's buy, let's buy, let's buy, let's grow, let's grow, let's grow. And hopefully we'll reach a certain size where things work out in terms of the data collection. You get the critical mass that you need in terms of the data collection and all that to do some pretty interesting stuff like we've been learning about today. So consolidation, that would be one, for sure. Technological complexity and the increase in the technological burden, particularly for translators and smaller companies. So there are more and more CAT tools coming out. So unfortunately for the people that didn't learn a lot about CAT tools in college, university, now you have to learn how to use like 15 of them. Because that seems to be the new trend, is using a lot of different CAT tools. Every company has their own, even end clients have their own preferred CAT tool. And what is happening is more than, instead of CAT tools figuring out a way between themselves, different CAT tool providers to integrate their systems into one another, to work together, right? What we're seeing is that translators actually need to learn how to use 10, 15 different CAT tools. So what happens is that you get one of them, you never get too good at one of them, right? You never can really specialize and get the most value for your productivity by using one CAT tool really well and knowing how to use all of its features. You basically learn how to use the same commands, the same basic commands, you know, put this into the TM, 15 different ways, right? So there's that going on with a technological burden that's increasing on all of us. And there's the process complexity, finally. That would be one thing that I think. You see a lot more projects aren't, you know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago when I started, you saw there were a lot more projects. It used to be like, oh, here's the text, give it back to me translated. And nowadays you see a lot more projects that are like, oh, here's a style guide you need to follow. Here's a limit in terms of how many characters you can use. Here's how many, what would be another example of process complexity would be just simply, here's a whole training session you have to attend to be able to use this, to work on this project, right? So the demands on translators to be part of a team, to work on a specific project for a specific client are growing a lot as well. So that would be some things. Sorry, I could be here all day, I apologize.
Thank you. That was super interesting. Krisztina, what are your thoughts on the increasing use of machine translation technology, and how can someone prepare for a career in translation technologies?
Just like Filipe mentioned with the CAT tools, and I think with any other technology in the industry, the increasing use of machine translation of course brings challenges to both individual translators and language service provider companies. And that is whether they use it themselves or not. But let's stick to when we use it. For example, post-editing, you have to keep in mind that as set out in the ISO standard 18587 for post-editing machine and translation output, post-editing is a different task than translation, requiring different skills and a different mindset than translation. But going further than that, I think post-editors should know how machine translation systems work and what possible pitfalls they may create. For example, with neural machine translation, which is now state-of-the-art, the output is more fluent than ever, but this fluency can be really deceptive, and also your creativity might be impacted. One of the top reasons why translators oppose post-editing is that the output they have seen so far was really bad. This is a survey for a couple of years before, but I think it's still the same. And it might be true because the machine translation output will be just as good as your machine translation engine. So what kind of data was used? What domain? How big was your data set? What was prioritized in the data set? Were expectations considered? So, yes, I think in a perfect world, post-editor should be aware of how technology works in the field of machine translation. And as for the career, well, if you want to go a more traditional way, you can study either languages and specialize into linguistics and computational linguistics, or the other way around, you can start with computer science and specialize into AI, machine learning, natural language processing. Or, of course, you can start online, which is nowadays easier than ever. There are a lot of self-taught data scientists as well. Or you can find a company who is interested in training you while you already contribute with your work. And that is what I'm doing too.
Okay, so very interesting as well. Ekaterina, how do you see the audiovisual translation industry? Have you felt that machine translation rise in that field? And what can you tell us about work volume, types of projects, clients, workflows, etc.?
So I think that our industry is particularly complicated and really unpredictable. There's just more content than there's ever been, and it's constant. Like, the public is unsatiated, and it keeps coming and coming. And so basically, because of this, us as translators, audiovisual translators, we will not suffer for a shortage of work for a good while yet. However, there is machine translation as well. And the one thing that's really troubling about it is that it's hard to consolidate livable, fair rates, especially today in this volatile economy with inflation and so on. The audiovisual industry is struggling to keep up. And there is also a whole divide and conquer situation and David and Goliath situation, that where every single freelancer is basically by themselves and find it hard to negotiate properly. And this is one of the things we actually talked about at Languages in the Media the other day. It's a very hot topic. So one solution to this is obviously, like I said before, join your association, because it's much easier to fight together for proper working conditions. But yeah, machine translation, it also it creates certain problems for us and complications, such as, for example, copyright issues, like you touched maybe on a little bit before, and the fair rates. And some vendors and clients use machine translation genuinely just as a tool to help us, and some vendors and clients are using it to cut costs. And as for the perspective of the audiovisual translator, many of us actually prefer to have it optional, because it will stifle our creativity. We get stuck in the translation that we see and we cannot think differently. And so it's much easier to have a blank paper. But it's easier if you have like, hi, hello, how are you? That's nice. But any more complex sentences, it becomes disruptive. In terms of work volume and types of projects and so on, it all really depends on the person, individual, and also the clients. The workflows and deadlines are usually quite tough. There's usually a constant chase, and usually we don't get enough time or money to do the jobs that we need to do, but we still do it because we love it. And types of projects is literally anything between Earth and the Sun. Like, it's every kind of TV show, documentary, or films you can imagine, and it depends on who you work for as well. And the work volume, like I mentioned before, is very large at the moment. So yeah, that would be my comment to that.
Thank you. Adrian, you're a content creator with more than 18,000 subscribers on YouTube at the moment. That's a lot of attention drawn to translation. And I wonder, who are these people? Are they translators, clients, potential clients, just curious people? And then I'm sure you've added so much value to them, but how do you think social media has helped you as a freelance translator?
It has definitely helped me. Who they are is something I'm asking myself every day. I really don't know. Well, one is my mom, one is my dad. That's all I know.
And one it's me.
One is you, okay. I don't know. I started this during the pandemic, April 2020. I had the idea. I was bored. I needed a new outlet, share my experiences. I always thought I want to do something like this, but of course I had to have been working in the industry first to start. And, a lot of people lost their job during that time. And freelance translation or online translation, as many people would search for, is something that comes up if you just search online for how do I make money online from home. That will come up, right? So it's natural that people are drawn to this because there seems to be such a low, barrier of entrance. And that actually creates an interesting dynamic there because you have on one hand, you have the people that come to my channel and just want to make some money on the side, not really taking it seriously as a profession. And then you have the other people who are studying for it, who take the necessary steps, who put in the work. And you have this kind of interesting bipolar situation when you have these two groups. And I see that a lot in the content I produce and in the messages I get. You immediately know if someone is taking it seriously as a job or just as a side project. That's where people that take it seriously can excel and can outplay the other ones, right? Social media, you mentioned. Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. We all know that it can be dangerous, like the depression amongst youth is at an all-time high and very closely linked to social media. Me personally, I only do professional things on there. I completely switched off, except for Reddit. I think, who mentioned it, Benjamin? I'm also a Reddit person. So, but I'm on this young professionals panel, but still I'm like a decade older than the people finishing university now, and they use the social media completely differently, and I understand that it's not that easy to just completely use it only professionally. But if you do, it's an amazing tool. It opens so many doors. I mean, where else can you literally have a focus group of everyone from a freelance translator to a language service provider to a policymaker? You can reach them all with the same hashtag. It's amazing, right? It's very powerful. If you realize that and if you use it to your advantage, it's, as I said, immensely powerful. And just if not everyone needs to make videos, that's not at all what I'm saying, but you should make use of what you have, what you're good at. As Filipe said, reach out to everyone, reach out to all of us here. We are friendly, we don't bite. Write us messages, ask for help. That's exactly what I'm trying to promote.
Nice, thank you. Well, adding on Adrian's perspectives on social media and Ekaterina's views on the audiovisual translation industry, I'd like to mention social media as a translation mode itself, which is one more option, for young professionals who are starting their careers. It's evident that video is gaining ground on social media, and subtitles are increasingly needed, sometimes to break the language barrier, but also to break the sound barrier. And not only for deaf users, who is definitely a necessity to make social media accessible, but also for those people who so many times use their phones with the sound off. I'm sure you've already noticed that more and more videos are subtitled on social media. So I would encourage subtitlers to reach content creators and offer collaboration. Actually, one of my first clients was an Instagram influencer. And so yeah, that's that's one more option. I would say having knowledge and experience in creative subtitles is a plus if you want to offer a good service for content creators, because playing with design, color, font, placement, movement, etc. Because in social media, standing out is crucial. And then dubbing is definitely less frequent, but it also happens on social media. There's one of the biggest YouTube channels, which is called Mr. Beast, has a second channel that's dubbed in Spanish. I mean, he publishes the same videos dubbed in Spanish. And this second account has 20 million subscribers. Like the first one, the main one has 100 million subscribers, and then this second one has 20 million subscribers. So that's a thing. Dubbing is a thing on social media. And as I said, one more idea for young professionals who might be deciding their future. So it's time to talk about the future. I have a last question for the audience. So please start Slidable. And the question is, can you describe with a single word what the future of translation looks like or feels like for you? And we'll discuss the results later. Nice. Nice, okay. Exciting, I like that. Okay, a lot of post-editing. Okay, nice. We'll leave the poll there and we'll get back to it later. So how about you? How do you see the industry and yourself in 10 years? Ekaterina, do you wish to start?
Sure, thank you so much. I think, first of all, accessibility will be really big. It's growing at a very huge pace. So if you are new, starting out, I would strongly recommend specializing in either audio description or SDH or anything like that. I think that will be huge in the years to come. I think there will be a lot more post-editing in terms of written translation, at very least. I also predict personally, just a personal thought, is that I think there will be a possible trend back to basics, like direct work with directors, auteurs, art houses, and production companies. I think that especially those who have a lot of experience might go to that. It might get harder for new translators to get into the audiovisual industry and get fair rates, but the associations will always try to help them. And I also think there will be a lot more mentor programs and a lot of more educational programs as well. I personally don't think that the machine translation will take over completely, because there's just so many variables. It's text, pictures, expressions, intent, entendres, and so on. I think that basically it's too many variables for machine translation to truly replace the human brain, but it will get closer and closer. And I think then costs will be cut, unfortunately. But personally, if I could choose, I would work with this until I retire, and maybe even after that, because I love this job so much. So if it's possible, I will stay here. If not, I do have a plan B, but I hope I don't have to use it.
Ours is definitely a beautiful job. Krisztina, what are your thoughts on what's to come?
To give some more ideas, I think there is a lot of room in translation technologies as well. Just as we see that data science is such an evolving field, natural language processing is just as huge. And if you are interested in it, it's also a good career possibility. Now, how the future looks like. I'm curious to see whether or how much the discussion from pro versus contra machine translation will shift to generic versus specific, specialized, customized machine translation. Because I think that needs to happen, and maybe it will, that requires exchange between machine translation engine providers and users, being translators. I think that post-editors should be able to give feedback on the quality of the machine translation engine, and machine translation engine providers should enable this exchange. I don't think that the human factor will ever disappear in post-editing and in evaluating machine translation engines either. Yeah, but it's also not realistic that machine translation or technologies will disappear or become less important. So if we want to use these possibilities and reduce frustration, then I think changes in two areas are urgently needed. One of them being the translation studies needs to be transformed, and that is what the next panel is about, so I'm really excited. Both in terms of preparing translators for a career and in terms of teaching more about technology. And the other one is, I think that the discussion that we see around the ethics of AI needs to be transferred to our industry, and we need to talk more about the ethics of machine translation.
Thank you. Filipe, what do you think of the future?
So I really appreciate you guys' perspectives, because I think it's really important to be on the lookout for what is going to change, right? And all the changes coming our way. And I should say, because you see some words here like terrifying on the board and that kind of stuff. We're early adopters actually in our industry. Like if you go to a conference of accountants, they're mostly not very aware of how much artificial intelligence is going to change the way they work. Some industries are going to get really caught by surprise. I don't think that's the case with our industry. We've been very aware, probably on the curve. We're on the early adopter side of the curve. So, coming to these conferences and attending these events is part of staying ahead of the curve, right? And I think most of us are pretty good at that, actually. But, I'd like just to talk a little bit about what I think isn't going to change as opposed to what is going to change. So, on the superficial side of things, I don't think price per word as a metric is going to change. I bring this up because I've only been here for 6-7 years in the industry, but this is a constant subject that keeps coming up is, we need to move away from price per word and charge based on project or charge based on something else. I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying I don't think it is going to change in the long run. What I also think isn't going to change is good customer service. So regardless of whether you're a translator working directly with a client or with an agency or an agency working with clients, being nice always pays off. I have my grandpa, he's 82 years old, he's still sharp as a razor knife, and I like to talk to him about sometimes management stuff, and he likes to contribute. He likes to feel like his opinions are valued and respected and his experience is valued. And what I noticed is that some of the things that were valuable 60, 70 years ago are still valuable today and probably still will be valuable 10 years from now. I can't imagine a client coming 5-10 years from now and saying, you know what, Filipe, everything was great. There was just one problem. Your customer service was just too good. If you could just be a little bit more unpleasant, if you could, just make the experience worse for all of us. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. On the subject of machine translation, what I think that if we're on the topic of pro against, I'm pro being used as a choice. I think that it benefits translators when they have the sort of like the plug-in option of seeing what the MT engine suggests and then they can choose to use it or not. I think there's some bad effects of just passing the whole text through machine translation and having somebody review it. And the reason for that is because there was some studies done in the 1970s, not about machine translation, but about being exposed to bad writing in large amounts, which is in essence what machine translation is poor quality writing. even if it's accurate, it will be most likely poor quality in terms of how well it's written. And what happened was they did these tests on middle school teachers, and they had the middle school teachers who were used to reviewing the work of 14-year-olds and 13-year-olds produce their own pieces of writing. What they found out was that the longer these teachers have been correcting bad writing, the more likely was their writing to be influenced by the quality of the bad writing as well. So I think that this is a phenomenon called habituation. And so we are a little bit in a position as a translation company owner, sort of like the coal mine owner, where you're like sending the coal miners out and you know it's not great for, I don't want to be dramatic and say you're destroying their skills, but you're making their writing skills worse by exposing them to that much bad writing. And by the way, that results in a lower rate. So, if the writing gets too poor, you know, companies tend to go and find somebody else, which I'm not saying, which I think that's a little bit about the ethics of machine translation I'd like to mention. I think it's important to keep that in mind. What are the consequences of being exposed? Well, the alternative scenario is we all get used to bad writing, which already seems to be happening on social media. We all just acknowledge bad writing as a valid form of writing, and then we don't have to fix it. So that's a little bit what I think.
Thank you, Filipe. Adrian, I'm giving the floor to you. Just briefly, please,
Try to keep it
because we're running a bit out of time already. How does the future look like for you?
Yeah, it's kind of sad to see all these negative words in there, but now the slightly like passive-aggressive human in all caps came up, so there is hope.
I like that human in all
You know, I don't understand why the connotation around it is always so negative. You know, it's gonna happen. Like, technological advances are amazing. It's not something negative, right? You just have to adapt to it and stay on top of your game. And one thing that I consciously do, I market myself now as rather a whole like language package than just a translator. So I market myself consciously as a language specialist, because translation is really only like 30% of what I do. The rest, so many other services randomly now sitting here. So, you know, you can shift technological advances to your benefit. And I think people should realize that, and young people do. As Aminda said, like, I think 40% are young people and the majority are freelancers. So they're actively taking part in decision-making, in policy-making, and that's very nice to see.
Thank you so much. I'll just add something. I read once that machines will only replace those who translate like machines, and that resonated with me. If a machine can eventually do my work, I will peacefully surrender. If a machine can really translate just as I do, I will, I will be thankful for being shown that my skills and efforts might be more useful elsewhere, right? But I believe that as long as creativity is needed, as long as critical thinking and common sense are needed, humans will be needed, and young professionals will be needed, and good professionals and good young professionals will be needed. So yeah, I see a place for us in the future. Okay, so we've already commented on the poll. I liked that human in all caps there. So it's time for Q&A. I have some questions here. The most popular question is, as a freelancer, how many hours a week do you dedicate to translation, and how many to administrative tasks? Does any one of you want to answer?
I have actual numbers for that because I've been tracking myself recently, and I would say about 70 or 60% is translation and QC work, and all of this is actually work, and the rest is administrative. So basically 30 to 40% of my work is unpaid. And I am trying to reduce it, but that's reality at the moment.
Thank you. There's another question here that I liked. Are you feeling fully satisfied with what you achieved, or is there something you want to reach in your professional career? And what is your professional objective? Does any one of you want this question?
I think there is always room for improvement, but it's also not the goal to arrive at the destination, right? It's the journey that counts, and that's really what I subscribe to and try to live every day. And I'm very happy with my profession, with my choice. And you can really shape, you can shape the path that you're going down on. And I wouldn't change anything. I'm happy where I am, but there's always more to go. I'm not exactly sure your last question was where I will be in 10 years. I don't know. I'm starting to build something. I'm starting to build a brand. I started hiring people, but I don't know what's going to happen. But as long as there are people, there will be languages and there will be a language industry, and I will be there.
Yeah. I won't talk about my specific goals, but I would definitely advise to set goals. Long-term, mid-term, short-term. I think it's important to have a goal, to have something to pursue. That would be my advice. Yeah. There's another one here who's very accurate for our panel. In your opinion, why are companies scared of trying to hire a young translator? How are we supposed to make experience if no one lets us do so? That is very frustrating. Does the CEO want to answer this?
It depends on the company, right? We actually have a boot camp that we do once every 6 months or so, where we teach people CAT tools, by the way. So whoever was worried about that can feel free to attend. And so we use that boot camp as a recruitment process where we test out, we see who performs the best. Because for translators, interviews, that just tests who's the most extroverted and who's the best at talking, right? It doesn't test who's the best at doing the actual work. So we actually like to have a course that people can attend, and that they, if they perform well in the course, then they're more than welcome to join. I guess that's what internships are for as well, is sort of the government subsidizes the risk that the company's taking, so to motivate companies to take risks. What I'd say is just keep in touch with your professors, keep in touch with the people from your school network, and they might pass along some job opportunities. Be on LinkedIn, be present there. And the industry is growing, so there will be lots of opportunities, I'm sure.
I actually want to add something that can be motivational, that skills actually matter for clients, and there are clients who give opportunities. Actually, for this translation of the Galician subtitles of The Rings of Power was my first project with a certain client. Like, I performed well on the test, and they gave me that project for the first time. So I think they really appreciate skills as well, not only experience. There's the most popular question right now is, what are the best platforms for networking in the translation field apart from LinkedIn?
I can start and maybe then hand over, but I read this question and it popped to my mind that where you live or what your target language is, there are groups on Facebook. These are mostly private groups. You have to enter what you are doing, what your languages are working with. Are you working in the profession at all? To have only professionals there. And these are very supportive communities. So if you reach out there, even either for advice or just to speak to someone, I'm sure that at least 5 professionals will jump on and will say, hey, I'm here, I will help you, let's talk. Maybe Adrian wants to add something? Because under your
was looking
channel,
at you.
then I will add it. In Adrian's channel, you can comment on his videos, and I've seen it, and I commented myself, and it's a very supportive community as well. So YouTube, Facebook.
Yeah, I think in general you can reach anyone on social media, and they will be happy to give you their thoughts and advices. Yeah.
And don't be afraid to organize yourselves too. So if you feel like it's missing and you can't find it, then do it.
I would also recommend very strongly something like Slack or Discord. That's really, really helpful. One of our companies where we freelance has a Discord that's very, very active, and it's really helped us to communicate much better. So I would also encourage anyone to start a group.
Thank you. So, Aminda, thank you so much.
Just talking about sharing ideas and advice, I think there was some really great advice given out in this panel. The thing about being open to criticism is really important, because that's actually the way you learn. Don't take it personally. It's a way of making your work better.